LUC AYOUN. Satsang staff. March 21, 2021. You've reached number 100, so we can start. So, I'm going to start. As I told you, we have a dozen questions that probably come from what we call the AGAPE staff. This is the group of people who are involved, in one way or another, in rebroadcasting, retranscribing, and disseminating, among other things, everything I say on the left and on the right. The first question. In terms of disseminating your messages, do you have any idea what you find most important or most essential to share? So, the most important thing is to share, of course, what we are living. We're not about this matter, I would say, displaying knowledge or experiences. But everything, absolutely everything that needs to be said, undertaken, in any case by all those who are living it or all those who are waiting for it, is to be as attuned as possible to the present instant, which is eternity. To accept that this world is a total illusion, not to move away from it, but to wake up from this dream or nightmare, because there is no other alternative. The vibrational rises and the experiences of the different states, for the most part, we have been experiencing for many years. Therefore, the most important thing is really this notion of the present instant, of eternity, of limitation as far as possible, either in the publications or in what you can understand or exchange as well. Everything that is related to the aspects of memory, whether it's your own memories or even the memories of human history that would serve us, I think at this point, absolutely nothing. It has always been said that we are going to live a nightmare that would allow us to wake up from this bad dream, if I may say so. It is inevitable, it is happening, everybody is living it, everybody knows it, everybody perceives it in different ways. The solution, the way out, is in oneself and only in oneself, and it is in the disappearance, properly speaking, of this world. This does not mean running away from this world, but as we will see, I think, in the questions, in the testimonies, it is at the same time to be aware that we are dreaming, to accept the dream for what it is, a dream, so as not to be subjected, I would say, to the nightmare of the dream. Knowing that you're dreaming when you dream will wake you up instantly by the power of the present instant, by the power of AGAPE, by the power of silence. Everything else, and the more the weeks go by, everything else will become completely superfluous, I would say, in relation to who you are. Of course, we also have responsibilities in our life, either in relation to children, or in relation to any social aspect, which are not at all an obstacle to living who we are. That is to say that these elements, if you will, which are the order of the day more than ever, are simply the acceptance of what is, the acceptance that we cannot change anything about what is. It is a script, it is a scenario that has been written and that we are going through, and we can find the way out of this script in the present instant, in silence, in acceptance and in reception and in AGAPE. Everything else is superfluous. So, evidently, the testimonies of the lived experience of that brothers and sisters who discover AGAPE or who discover the great silence or the truth, are evidently essential. They are not testimonies of experiences. They are testimonies of the state beyond any state. This is exactly what we all seek and exactly what those of us who are there experience. This is, I think, at least in my eyes, the essential point, whether it is in relation to the channelings, the satsangs or even the neuroscientific explanations, or all the questionings that may exist, which in the end are only there to bring us back to this essential which is the present instant, which is AGAPE, which is acceptance and which is the great silence. Thus, the second question tells us, the 30 people who currently make up the staff, there are so many different interpretations, points of view, experiences of the messages you transmit. Is it an opportunity? Should we claim it as a team and develop it in our ways of presenting your work? So, I think that interpretation is a characteristic of humans, whether in relation to a theatrical scene, an image, a frame, a text or anything else, but you have to weigh it. That is to say, from the moment you settle in a gape, from the moment you live the great silence, the present instant, you are obviously less and less subject to an interpretation or to a personal conviction, I would say. Therefore, the question does not even arise. Clearly, we all have different sensitivities, different aptitudes, different abilities, but also perhaps different resistances. So, instead of dwelling on differences of interpretation, I suggest that we remember within the staff, and in all those who join us at different levels, not only in the staff, that the most important thing is to listen to each other. Remember that in a gape there's nothing to defend, neither what is right nor what is true. It is not necessary to defend a point of view or an interpretation, but to let oneself be penetrated, I would say, by the words of the other. Not in an attitude of understanding to argue, debate or impose another point of view, but to see the convergence that can exist beyond the difference of points of view and beyond the possible interpretations. But you all know, even among staff members, that from the moment we live a gape, there can be no difference of views. Of course, there can be different perceptions. Of course, there can be different experiences, different vibrational levels, but the purpose is absolutely the same. So, from there, there's no need to interpret, there's no need to justify any interpretation, there's no need to compare interpretations either. Let's remember that a gape started from something quite, I would say, direct and spontaneous. So, let's continue with that approach. Of course, sometimes we don't always understand each other at the beginning, independently of the language barrier. There's the cultural barrier, there's also the individual barrier, the individual baggage we have lived through, which conditions us in spite of everything. It's all what we call history, the habits that we are subjected to while the character is there. So, obviously, there will always be, even in a gape, I would say the most perfect, differences of perception, differences of assimilation, of interpretation, which should not mislead us. Let us rather move towards convergence. Let us leave aside all that is in relief, or all that may seem misunderstood or misinterpreted. This is only temporary for both sides. So, there's no need to worry about that. And let's keep moving forward, keeping in mind this notion of kindness, acceptance, embracing but also silence when the other raises an idea. We have nothing to defend, of course, we have nothing to impose, neither one nor the other, neither me nor you, of course. But simply, effectively in certain cases, to confront visions a little different, a little, not quite correct, but in one case, for one as for the other. There's no difference. And it is through listening and acceptance that differences of perception, differences of viewpoint or interpretation will be resolved, which will end, again, in a great burst of laughter. It is evident that someone who is Aries, even if free, liberated from the dream, will maintain Aries behaviors until the character likes its last breath. It's the same for astrological signs, it's the same for educations, etc. So, instead of seeing these differences that are real on the plane of the dream, if we accept that they too, these differences, mean nothing in the principle of essence and in the principle of the absolute, then what may seem to us as something unclear or not understood will disappear by itself. This is also the intelligence of light. Not only in the things that will happen to us in our life, which we can see, but also in interpersonal relationships. They must manifest as in family relationships, whatever the oppositions may be. This is how you prove to yourself the power and intelligence of love and light, which act, as I have said, independently of you and your will. Without that, there's no true sacrifice. Without that, there's no true surrender to reality or the real. So, let's take the third question. So, someone to say, Obviously, there are different stages of living agape, and with a view to sharing as widely as possible, can we imagine that the first levels are as important as the more advanced ones to witness and to transmit to everyone? Who are the speakers that excite you the most, that surprise you the most, or that bring you the most? So tax a lot of questions at the same time. Indeed, there is a kind of, we could classify the different stages of the awakening, of the dream, that we all have in the morning, plus we ask ourselves who we are, where we are, all that must work again to be able to affirm, I am such an identity, such a body, in such a place. There are some who do it instantly. There are those who may take several minutes, or even several hours, depending on the type of awakening they have. So, obviously, at a pedagogical level, we could imagine that there are several stages, vibratory or not. But I remind you that agape has nothing to do with vibration. Not at all, since it is the absence of vibration that makes the silence, not the vibrations. Vibrations refer and will always refer to the superconsciousness, but not to the consciousness, that is, to that which is prior to consciousness, that is, to the moment when we remember who we are before we experience consciousness. So, instead of talking about stages, I think we can reduce it to something very simple. The more you're in agape, the more present the inner silence will be. This does not mean that you lock yourself in your silence, that you no longer communicate. It simply means that, whatever you express, whatever you do, the silence is always there in the background, even if the character is angry, even if the character seems to take control sometimes, it is not at all like that. I mean, this notion of silence is fundamental. And the more you penetrate into this great silence, the more you will feel free and the more you will awaken, I would say, in an increasingly frank and more accurate way. And then there are mechanisms that one can imagine, and this was said in the Satsang and also by several speakers, where one has the impression, at the same time, of living a dream and living the truth that has nothing to do with the dream. Okay. And these two things overlap, of course, it was explained at length and, in fact, this is what we live most. There is a sense of unreality in this world, which doesn't mean that we run away from it, doesn't mean that we don't face what we have to face within the dream, but we are, I would say, definitely out of the dream, and definitely out of any pretense. Which doesn't mean we don't want to do anything, but we don't have any pretense. As Nisargadatta said, there's no more desire, and when there is no more desire, it is total peace of the self, of the non-self, of the character. Isn't it? So instead of talking about stages and trying to discriminate or give an evolutionary framework that in fact does not exist, I think we can sum it up by the quality of the silence that is lived. You can't go wrong. Like agape, if you want to when somebody asks if they're living agape, but you can't ask that to somebody else. You already know that. Either you live it or you don't live it. It can't be intricative. In the same way, the silence I'm talking about, when you live it, you cannot confuse it with the silence of words, the silence of sounds, the silence of lights. It has nothing to do with it. That is not the silence. This inner silence has nothing to do with the silence of the senses. It is much more than that. Of course, it does not encompass a silence of the senses, but a kind of dazedness of the senses, where the silence remains no matter what you hear, no matter what discussion or activity is going on. And this is something that you notice and you can't do anything about it, even when you're sick, even when you're not well, quote unquote, at the level of your state of mind, as can happen to anybody, because you notice anyway that great silence, that acceptance, that embrace, even if the character is angry, it's still there. You see. But there is no relief. There is no crisis. There is nothing but the present instant that is experienced even at the level of emotions. It has never been said that emotions should stop. Emotions are life, they are what keeps us alive. There's no need to judge them positively or negatively. There are simply two differences in behavior whatever the emotion is. Either you let it go, and at that moment you know it is not you but you accept to live it, or you do not let it go. And on the other hand, when you're really free of the dream, you see it clearly. You see it in every act of your life. Therefore, instead of considering this notion of stages, there's no first level and no ended level. There's a progression of silence. And this progression, once it has been lived once, can only be exponential and can only settle more and more, there too, indeed, each at his own pace, of course. But this is not a reason to make it a stadium. That is why we have simplified more and more the so-called spiritual language, the energetic or vibratory language, to stay only with the essential, which is in fact, I would say, a posture of consciousness that will allow, through this attitude of embracing, of acceptance, of silence, of abnegation, rather than sacrifice at the beginning, to lead you to discover a gap, to discover the great silence and the present instant. But as long as you want to make it an objective, as long as you are looking for this silence, as long as you are looking for a gap, it is very simple, you cannot live it, it is impossible. There is only the silence of acceptance that creates in a certain way this kind of internalization, of introjection at the psychological level, and it is in this kind of return to the heart of the heart as it has been called, to the return to the interior of oneself, where there is no more mind, where there is no more emotion, and where there is almost no more character, that you will remember, where you will remember who you are. But as long as there is an indication of the person in relation to this, you cannot live. It is impossible, because you create the distance from yourself. This is also part of what we have said, namely that everything that has been written is written. You cannot change one iota of what is. It is not a renunciation of the world, it is a going beyond the world, which opens you to the truth of the live beyond the experience, but through the present instant, through the incarnation and also through your presence in this moment. And there, it will go perfectly. So, it is not a technique again. I have called it the pedagogy of a gap because you have to put it into words. But it is something tremendously simple. It is so tremendously simple that for many people it seems extremely complicated. The first step is to really stop analyzing your own emotions, your own mind, and turn your awareness first to the present instant, to what is, right now, in the instant. Accept fully what is in the instant, even if you don't agree and especially if you don't agree. Go through this experience of disagreement, quote unquote, even mental or emotional or affective or whatever. And let live what is lived, the light is lived without you. It is through you, it is also in you, of course, but it is not you. You are prior to the light. There's no concept, no explanation, no knowledge, no history, no master, no mystic that can lead you to it. On the other hand, you have all the capacities to take you there by yourself, as long as you respect, if I may say so, these few tips that are very simple, that anyone can put into practice, whatever their age, whatever their experience, whatever their history, whatever their wounds, whatever their vibrational or non-vibrational state, but it is tremendously simple. Accept that it is simple, accept that what you are living is the only possibility, and you will see that it is a dream. And in that moment, the dream, of course, you will participate in it because you cannot not participate in it, but it is as if there is indeed a character with its history, its memories, its karma, its soul, its spirit, and that there is something else that is beyond the presence, that we call the abode of supreme peace, that we can call the absolute, the pure Brahman. Again, these are words, but it is something in which you can only, and I will repeat it every time, you can only recognize yourself. So, if you ask yourself whether you have recognized yourself, obviously it means you have not recognized yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask the question. You can't ask anybody. It is so evident on the inside. When you see the testimonies of brothers and sisters who have lived it, even if it is not totally installed, it is so evident, it is so strong, like something that has nothing to do with something that happens. It is really a kind of total displacement of perception, of consciousness, of time, of space, which leads to a radical change, even if the character with its temperament, its behaviors, sometimes still its memory resistances that are linked to habits as I've already explained for 3-4 years, will indeed come into play. But first, everyone has exactly the same capacity in the present moment, in the acceptance, in the silence, in the embracing and in the crossing, if you will. It is the same process for everyone, whether you have experienced the opening of the doors, of the chakras, whether you have vibrated, whether you have not vibrated, it does not matter. It is something that will inevitably happen. Therefore, the more available you are for the present moment, available simply for the dream itself, knowing, affirming that it is a dream, the more you will awaken from the dream. You cannot do otherwise. You cannot fight the dream. There's nothing to improve. There's nothing to evolve. This discovery that has been called the commitment, the promise, the good news, time zero, it is exactly the same, it is for everybody. It is the good news of the Christ matrix, if you still want to call it by anything referenced, but it is, above all, the great silence of that present moment. It is where you are in that state of grace that is so evident within you, even though others do not perceive it and do not see it. You do not need to go into meditation or levitate or put on an orange or white dress to be recognized, for you are completely transparent. From that moment on, in this transparency, in this humility as I have called it, where you can do nothing but be present in the instant, even if you're preparing your vacation, preparing yourself as is normal within the dream, you are no longer affected, really and concretely. This does not, of course, prevent you from having things to resolve as you have written individually and personally. So, let us move forward a little bit on these issues. So yes, I also get the question, still on this question 3. Who are the interveners that resonate with you the most? So, indisputably, the one who made me vibrate the most of all times, it is not Biggie, I already explained it for my close ones, it was Metatron who, every time, made me ultra-vibratory effects. Who surprises you or who brings you more? But I would say that today, there's no longer any of these interveners who bring me anything, except the possibility of returning me to the bosom of the present instant, more and more easily and with certainty, of the evidence, but one cannot strictly speak of contribution, it is really a resonance that is made, and at that level, I do not make any difference. On the other hand, in fact, in the whole era of Ultra's dimensions and before the years 2017, that is to say, about 10 years ago, it was evidently Biggie, and before all Metatron who had, I would say, this vibratory altitude. But today we know that this vibratory altitude corresponds to the expansion of the consciousness, but not at all to the consciousness which is the arrest of the expansion of the consciousness. It is the return to the heart of the heart, to the 0 point, call it what you will, the present instant, the real, it does not matter, but in any case, whatever words we put to this experience, it is always, always, the same experience. So, the fourth question. Have you imagined or put yourself in the shoes of people discovering your interventions for the first time? Of course. You cannot be a channeling quotes, or a medium from a very young age without paying attention to what the other person thinks or says or feels. It's totally different for the agape state. The good news, I announce it. I don't mind being welcomed. I don't care if I'm rejected. I simply say what I am living. I simply say where the real is and invite everyone to live it or not. But I cannot make you live anything, and I cannot induce anything in you if you have not accepted it. So, from now on, today anyway, I have no more possible imagination about what people feel, either through the interventions, or the interveners, or the satsangs, the scientific explanations, whatever. It's take it or leave it. Trust no desire to do harm, no desire to sell anything. There's only a desire to say that all this is a sham, this world, creation is a sham. I'm not the first to say this. I may say it in a violent way, but as long as you believe that there is an evolution, as long as you believe that you're going to get better, it is simple, you are not available for the present instant. So, you are not available for a gape. It's one or the other. That's what I'm saying. So, from then on, and from the moment that more and more of us are living it, I don't care, I would say, whether I'm welcome or not. I say what I live. I say what it is, for me. It may not be true for you, but you have the opportunity to live it exactly the same way, okay? There's no more LUC AYOUN, than Abba, than Amram Michael Ivanov, than the entities, since there has never been anyone. You see a little of what might seem a paradox. We are all present in the dream, we all have our life, our age, our worries about health, about marriage, about money or whatever. It is not because we free ourselves from the dream that we are going to do, as we would say, koi, the little birds, and escape from our humanity, from our simplicity. This is precisely what makes the beauty of silence, the beauty of escape and the beauty of freedom. So, question number 5. I pick up my glasses. It seems to me that until the natural state of escape is fully installed, we have not yet fully recognized ourselves. Our characters can tend to identify and play the executioner victim savior roles of duality that we all play or have played since the mists of time, rather than being in the benevolence and service of the love that we are. Can you explain this? When we see it clearly, can we accept it, walk through it and laugh at ourselves? Yes, of course. But it is illusory to believe that you must be in benevolence, that you must be in the service of love. That's the person who believes it. So the problem is that there is no one. So how do you want to be in service? How do you want to be in benevolence? You are no more in benevolence than you are in malevolence. The natural state has nothing to do with any benevolence or any malevolence. The natural state is natural, that is, what emanates from you is truth, whether you want it or not. So why go to the question of how to solve this or how to change this? No, you see. And as the brother or sister asking the question says, we do indeed laugh at ourselves. Of course, even when you are, shall we say, perfectly awake, which means nothing, you are either awake or you are not, simply. On the other hand, you can be awake at certain times and be less awake at other times, that is, be more subject to the character, that's true. But as time goes by, days, experiences, weeks, even months or years for others, you will notice that all that was relief from the personality can no longer affect you. That's how it happens. So, yes, the infernal triad, executioner, victim, rescuer, evidently, has been at work since time immemorial in this dual, illusory and completely false world. Moreover, not only this world is false, all worlds are false. There's no world. Of course, I am aware that I have channeled dozens of entities. Of course, I am aware of the journeys I have made in Mary's ships, in the 18th dimension under Michael's wings. But all that represents nothing compared to the present instant and the natural state. Nothing at all. So much so, that at no time today, would I imagine going to dream of these things, for all of creation is a dream, not just this third dimension, but all dimensions without exception. There has been creation. We live an alpha and an omega. But the alpha has joined the omega. The omega is equal to the alpha. All this happened at the same point, at the same time. It all happened at the same time. So, from there, we also know according to science, that time does not exist. Time does not exist. And space doesn't exist either. There's nothing. There's only a gap. There's this intelligence of life, this intelligence of light. You are all entities. As Nisargadatta said when he incarnated, you are God, as he used the word God, not in the connotation of Yadebit, of course, but you are the prime source, if you will. Biddy said, the only difference between you and me is that I know, you don't know yet. When he said that, it wasn't knowing, it was living it. And today, to all the brothers and sisters living a gap, we can only tell you that, and how quickly you will remember who you are, before creation, before form. At that moment, the dream is over. There's no longer a reason to go to the fifth dimension or to undergo, as we once believed, a vibrational assignment, according to our stellar origins, our stellar lineages and all that. It's all part of the same dream. So whether we talk about high astral, low astral, mental world, causal world, 18th dimension or 21st dimension, it doesn't make sense anymore. That is, when you live the truth, you can no longer be subject to any dream of creation. You have found yourself. It is not a vision of spirit, it is not a concept, it is something that is extremely prevalent, it is something that is extremely powerful that you cannot escape. And yet you let the other person live their dream. You can't convince anybody. You can just be what you are, in the most natural and simple way in the world, and the other person will either resonate or not. And this is not necessarily related to a satsang or the words I am saying now. It can be done at any time in life, over any encounter, in any circumstance and with any person. It all depends on your inner disposition. So, the sixth question. Because of the dominant materialistic approach in our societies today, the presentation of your messages is a real challenge. The materialistic approach is simply the approach of what the Easterners have called the Kali Yuga, the end of the Kali Yuga, the end of the Dark Ages. And I have always said that it is necessary to descend into the depths of horror and nightmares to awaken from the nightmare. It is not by dreaming of little birds and ethereal dimensions, of Michael's wings or distant worlds, that you will awaken. Earth is the place of the first dream and the last dream. I had the opportunity to explain it at length, to demonstrate it at length in the years 2018, 2020. We no longer have to worry or care about it. Just be present in yourself, be lucid in the instant, be humble enough to accept what is, and you will live the great silence and you will live agape. So, it is not a challenge. On the contrary, I find that, despite appearances, the more the chaos grows, the more the material chaos grows, the more possibilities there are to find oneself. Besides, it is very simple. When the outside world disappears, society first, money, profession, volcanoes awakening everywhere, when tsunamis start coming, when the earth's crust moves, what is left for you but to turn inward? This is exactly what we are living. So, it's up to you to decide if you want to dream or if you want to find yourself. But in either case, one thing that is inescapable is that you can only wake up. Even if my words, this also relates to the question about the effect of my words, even if today it seems obnoxious to you, even if today it seems completely horrible or untrue to you, I don't care. I know that this is the real, living it, the place where there are no more memories, the place where there are no more past lives, where there are no more future lives, where there are no forms, where you are at the same time the ether, you are the light and you are also the absence of light. It is all this at the same time. You are the whole of creation, you are the whole of the dream. Now I cannot, nor can I convince you, and, above all, I do not want to convince you, nor make you adhere to what I live. But you can live it. And only you can decide it. So, I would say that this materialistic approach to society, on the contrary, today, at least with the chaos, is much easier than 20 years ago. As I said, the outside world is disappearing in all its components, and at some point, you will have only yourselves to fall back on. When you have nothing else to fall back on but the outside, at whatever level, what will you do? You will have no choice but to go in and find yourself. Of course, you may have nightmares, discomfort and resistance, but it doesn't matter. It's a game because there is no one. You don't exist. The resistance comes from the idea of being a person. From the moment you have lived that there is nobody, the resistance resolves itself. It doesn't stop you from being sick, it doesn't stop your body from aging, it doesn't stop your mind from becoming clearer with age. But what you are, that you cannot forget, is impossible. It is impossible because it is not an experience, it is not a memory, it is the real of the present instant. So, the seventh question, more or less along the same lines. Do you have any opinion about the most flexible or intelligent way to make public, to present, the themes that you develop? So, I would say what I see, by the way there are many of you who are already doing this, a lot, is to take key phrases. The key phrases were spoken by LUC AYOUN, but they don't belong to me. They are phrases like in the Satsang, and as always, even in the channelings, there is never anything prepared. That is to say, only what comes out is planned by the listeners, or is planned by the interveners, or by myself in a programmed way, but there is never any anticipation or preparation. The natural state is also that. It's not about public speaking, it's simply that you let so much come out that you no longer need to control your own thoughts. Here I am talking to you, I have no thoughts, it just comes out. That's why sometimes I feel like I'm going back and forth. Of course, if I had a memo and I had to follow a precise plan, it wouldn't happen. If it happens, it's for a reason, it's not because I'm losing my mind, it's not because I'm senile. It is simply because there are states of silence and vibratory states that are beyond speech. Nisargadatta, his own teacher, his successor today, they all tell you the same thing. The words, in the satsangs, for example, as they are doing, we can talk about the rain and the sun. The important thing is what happens, I would say, under the subconscious threshold. And when it comes out by itself, it allows the present instant to be present and to be lived. And it can be as much with a painting, as with a song, as with a guitar piece, as with the exchanges we make. And the more you enter into this spontaneity of the natural state, the more things will be evident, the more things will really happen with fluidity and harmony. But it is not you who seeks the harmony, it is the intelligence of light that manifests in that moment. And you have nothing to do because there is no one there. Understand that it is not an effort, it is not an asceticism or a behavior. Of course, as many great teachers of Advaita tend to say, meditation is important. Meditation is important in the beginning, to appreciate the mental silence, to go up in vibration if you will, to do the stillness. But today for me meditation is discarded, it means nothing. What do you want me to meditate? Life is a dream. Meditation is a dream. Anything that takes me to the experiences of manifestation, of any nature, would be a dream. I have lived, I have already explained the different dimensions as if there were dolls nested everywhere, as Castaneda described, but these experiences, however beautiful, however colorful, however many worlds I see, have no interest because I am no longer deceived by this dream, that is, the dream of creation. There's no one. As long as you believe that you're somebody, you cannot be nothing. It is impossible. And it does not imply a kind of self-flagellation, nor a sacrifice in the Christian or Catholic sense. It's something that happens inside you and has nothing to do with external circumstances. You can flagellate yourself for years, you can pray rosaries for dozens of years, as I have done, but it is strictly useless. As long as you believe that something is good for something, you have not understood. You don't need anything, least of all yourself. So, 8th question. Do you have any opinion on the most flexible or intelligent way to go public? Yes, it is to follow it also for the various staff members, as you do perfectly well for many, to suddenly take a sentence out of a satsang or a channeling, just to put it there. It could be from me. It could be from anyone else. You will have seen that I myself put many quotes when I'm on Facebook, whether it's from Eckhart Tolle now, or Jeff Foster, or others, Betty Quirion or others, because obviously, even if the experience is very different, the purpose is exactly the same. And each one, according to his artwork, I would say, that is within him in the world of manifestation, will translate that with a sensitivity, words, that are perhaps different. But I assure you that it is exactly the same. What Christian Singer lived, what Jeff Foster lived, what Nisargadatta lived, what all the agape people live today, what I lived, is exactly the same. It doesn't matter how it happened, what experience led to it, but in any case, the reality is the finality of what was lived. And it is always the same, it is always the same. Then, the 8th question. We all know you're very playful, enterprising and always enthusiastic about any action to unconditionally share messages of love, joy, openness and awareness. Although I don't see a question. How nice, Jean-Luc laughs. I don't see any question. So, the 9th question. Since Mariana de Moy's last intervention, I live long periods of great silence and bliss. I disappear in the state of joy, calm, smiling and motionless. I fall asleep 2 or 3 times a day, so I spend less and less time in the ephemeral life, only the minimum. Are we gradually disappearing from this world without ceasing to be present in it? Is it an escape? No, there's no escape. That is to say that you're obliged to note, according to your lives, of course, because someone who goes to work 10 hours a day, is obliged to work, even if he is in a gape, even if he is in silence. That life many times organizes things so that we have, I would say, time. Whatever the circumstances of our life, there is always a moment, more or less long, more or less intense, in which we have this availability. In fact, many of you, and I think you must have exchanged with each other, have noticed that we see this dream more and more clearly as a dream. We are more and more in the silence, in the bliss, even within the action, and in fact if we are available, there is no more action. This is how we wake up. This is how we definitely come out of the dream. Nisargadatta often took the example of that is, of sleep from sleep. In the year 2012, the year of his first channelings, Nisargadatta, Biti, insisted a lot on this notion of consciousness, of sleep and dream, of absence and turiya. He used to say that the dream is the real. Yes, because the real, we have access to it through what is called the unconscious or the subconscious, at certain moments of the night, but the mistake would be to make a translation of it into character. Everything that is shown to us is ultimately just to go beyond the character, not to understand it, just to go through what is shown. So yes, as this sister says, more and more of us are realizing that we can, without any escape, just bathing this state of bliss, of joy, of silence, of samadhi if you will, it doesn't matter, again they're just words, but we detect these moments very, very well. And in those moments, there is no more concern for anything, because there is nobody, there is no more world, but it is not an escape from the world. It is an awakening. It has nothing to do with it. The flight from the world is not an awakening, it is a nightmare. It is the acceptance of our humanity, of the simplicity of our life or of our actions, which allows us to establish ourselves more and more easily in this beatitude. So, as our sister says, she closes her eyes and falls asleep. I have realized that I can live exactly the same thing, that is to say, to be present somewhere, in any activity whatsoever, and at the same time experience this great inner silence. This does not prevent me from living the dream, but it is true that there are moments when I would like to be able to enjoy this state of happiness. But remember that we have to be present within the dream and that we are not Marana Demora to stay X time in ecstasy and let things happen. Again, many of us have obligations within the stream. If life makes us have less and less obligations, that is also what we have written. So, in either case we have only ourselves to blame, in quotation marks. There's no blame other than the script you wrote yourselves, and you all wrote the best possible script to wake up. That is absolutely true, and, once again, you cannot believe me, it is better not to believe me. You can only live it, from the instant you stop pretending to be anything but truth, anything but agape, and anything but silence. The experiences are not the silence. In the silence, there's no experience. In the silence, there's no world, there's no form, there's no vision, there's no light, there's pure bliss, and that is truth. So, question number 10. We would like to know what would make you happiest to do or experience in this field. Well, I think I'm spoiled enough now to have the opportunity to continue to express this experience. I'm perfectly happy with that. As you know, Stefan is well placed to know, and other friends that we broadcast with like Lisa and others. I don't want to hear any more about techniques. It worked quite a bit on technique, on software. It created bioimpedance measurement systems. I had a very technical and techy part, but that now, I'm completely past that. It's not my brain that degenerates and weakens with age. It's simply that I don't have time for that anymore. I have time to be in the present instant. I have time to be in what life gives me to live each day, at whatever level it is. So, for now, I would say I'm extremely spoiled. I don't need more than what's there. The message is spread through all the relays that you are, each and every one of you, in every possible way. As I said to Stefan and others, I am a node, a hub. Of course, it goes through me, but it is not centralized, it is decentralized. There's a lot of talk about centralized finance and decentralized finance. That is, I don't keep anything with me. So obviously, this is also what we are getting. You see, for example, there we did a Satsang on the Gate Press, on Facebook, but when we do events that are a little bit more important, whether it is with Elisa, whether it is with Stefan that we're all doing May, obviously there is a certain number of expenses, a certain number of logistics is implemented, because it is not like on Facebook. Hello, I will do a video at 21 o'clock. You have to follow up on emails. When it is on Zoom, you have to send the codes. So, there's all kinds of logistics behind it, which is a little bit more demanding I would say than on Facebook because we operate at the moment, but clearly with the current techniques and modes of distribution, as they say, it's fashionable, and tries less and less face-to-face, but everything is done remotely. It's fashionable, but it's not embarrassing. Of course, we need to meet, touch each other, see each other physically. But for Agape it doesn't matter. We don't need to see each other side by side or face to face. It turns out that this virtual medium also allows us to experience the same thing. We have had enough experiences, whether on Telegram, today on the Agape service, or at the time on the Agape Perpetual Love Bath that Stefan created. We all know very well that we can live the same without seeing each other and at a distance. So, the objective, indeed today, is a kind of natural multiplication in which I have not forced anything, nor decided anything, which is better than doing, for example, a meeting with 20 or 30 people, to make benefit obviously all those who are at a distance by the transcribers, those who take care of the videos like Louis Gary, like so many others. there is something else that will be put in place. So, all of this requires, I would say, a form of remuneration, which is quite logical, which we are discussing in different ways. But obviously we can't have a video service outside of Facebook, with transcribers, translators, even a few hours later, without considering some form of remuneration. I'm not talking about remuneration as a salary, but I'm talking about a logical remuneration for what you do. So, we'll let things move forward as they are, and then we will see as the months go by. So, question number 11. There's now this technical possibility to make available to each staff member who wishes it, a website, a personal space, in order to leave them total freedom to present, express themselves, testify and spread the themes of their sharing and revelations. Are you willing to contribute for each one of them, advising them or supervising them? No, because they are free people, they are adults, of age and vaccinated as they say, that is, from the moment, as some Brazilian friends do very well by the way, especially in Chantilly's page, they have people who have indeed been inspired, not in my ideas but in my writings, but they are not mine, they are universal, they do not belong to me in their own right. As I told Marina Marino and Monbalgidio, my texts are freely available, they can do whatever they want with them. There are some who have made books with them, there are some who have made sites with them, of course, and God knows there have been many sites that have taken all the teachings at the time of Autra's dimensions, but I have no desire to supervise or control anything. Again, I am a center. So, the information passes or comes from me, but then it gets disseminated. I don't want any kind of control or supervision of what they may say and do to each other. That's their responsibility and I'm not to put my foot down. It's as simple as that. Again, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a guru, I'm not a school leader, I'm not a businessman, I'm not even a doctor anymore because I'm already an old retired doctor. So, if you will, I have no pretense or desire to advise, supervise, direct or control anything. That is what I have done with the technique, whether it is with Stefan now, whether it is with my partner, whether it is with Elisa. People take their share of the work, but I don't have to give advice. This is also the intelligence of light. If you're truly authentic and if you're truly in the present moment, you must also trust what is. If you trust what is, everything will be fine. Of course, sometimes there are problems of interpretation, of understanding, even simple ones, but with the intelligence of light, this resolves itself. It is not a conflict, it is not, how to say, something to be solved, it is something that resolves itself. For that, you have to rely on the intelligence of light, which is very easy when you already live, even a little bit. You see. So, it's not my goal to direct anything, it's not my goal to advise anybody. I make available to them what the interveners have made available to me, what I make available to them. Everyone finds what they need to find in it, but I don't have to, no need to, if you want, in the same way that when there were face-to-face meetings, as they say, you saw that I did not organize anything recently. It was my friends on the left and on the right, who organized both the trip to Peru and, unfortunately, what was cancelled last year, including Brazil. Everything that was organized for this year, which didn't take place, like the citation encounters in magnificent places, because we should have been in New Caledonia, we should have been in the Pacific, we should have been in Mexico this year, so we should have spent a lot of time in the seas. It didn't get done, but it wasn't me who decided to organize it, it was Light Intelligence who organized it, with underwater filmmakers, with people of great value in the aquatic world, with cetaceans. But I didn't look for that. And I think for each of you on the AGAPE staff, whatever your ability, whatever your desires, whatever your wishes, whatever your desires, whatever you want, or whatever you don't want either, you should let the intelligence of light show you. Again, I in any case, claim no position other than to give you choices, and let you do with them what you will, at all levels. It has always been so. At the time, there was a site called ultrasdimensions.rus, which collected the channels after transcribing them into Russian. There were dozens of sites. There was even an osteopath who took up the 12 stars of the head, with his own terminology, the 12 stars that we had, the 12 spiritual functions around the 7th chakra, who made an osteopathy course from that. When we created Trinitarian Osteopathy, Triumvirate, with friend Vincent, there's no claim to either name or method. I don't do it the American way, I do it because I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it, and this enjoyment is in me. It is natural, it is not linked to any kind of pretension, neither spiritual, especially not spiritual, and even less economic. Of course, finances are involved when there is a training course once again, or when there are satsangs where it is necessary to organize, but all that is done there too I would say without me. I have never scheduled anything, things schedule themselves, or cancelled in case of pandemic, as is the case. That's it. But I never sought, again, to take ascendancy or direction or control of anything. Feel free, all of you, to do whatever you want. The teamwork that is the dissemination in different ways of what I am relaying to you, it is also up to you to relay it in your own way. Certainly, there are people who do not understand what I am saying, who perhaps understand it with you, you see. Because we don't have the same words, because we don't have the same sensitivity, because we don't have the same modes of expression, and we don't even have the same modes of communication. So, it's easy. I'm going to give an example for 2 minutes. When we talk about communication, you have to know that human beings have, as a rule, 5 different modes of communication. I don't want to give you a psychology course now, but let's say, for example, you are a perceptual and affective mode of communication, meaning you use affective and perception, and you want to communicate with someone in front of you who, for example, would be exactly the opposite, meaning a rational person. You need square proofs. You can never communicate. It's as simple as that. And I don't claim to be able to communicate with all the modes of communication that exist on this planet. I also have my own mode of communication, which is not a rational mode, which is also not an emotional mode. So, if you want, it's normal that the same experiences, translated by maybe different phrases, will obviously have, as I said, the same effect, depending on whether it goes through this person or the other. The result will be the same. But it will pass through one, it will not pass through the other, because there is indeed, before understanding that there is not one, there is still this experience of a particularism of individuality, one can say, which is with its modes of communication, with its modes of understanding, with its modes of behavior, with which you cannot, if I may say, engage. You will never get a rational to communicate with a pure perceptive, for example. One is based on perception, the other on reason. They can't meet. You see. It's the same thing in what I relate to you that you relay in turn, in your own way. And that, I insist, I have no advice to give, no supervision of anything. You have told us enough about autonomy and freedom, so I am not going to allow myself to break that. Be autonomous and be free, I can't tell you any better. So, I'm looking to see if there are any other questions that have come in. Stefan hasn't sent in any other questions. I haven't seen any other questions come in. I'm just looking to see if it skipped any of the questions. So, we've done a little run through. We've been online for a little over an hour. So, I'll remind you that we also there are other questions that are being written, that we have 2 other events that are being organized right now. One is in early April, I think it's Easter weekend, April 3rd and 4th, which is organized with Elisa and with French-Spanish simultaneous translation. and we have scheduled from May 13th to 16. I think you have to check again. It is still far away. An event this time through the Agate Press site, which will be the same type of event, which is called Binder Distance Learning. There is a question that arises at this point, which is, what about the event? But the event, my dear, we're living it. We're in the midst of it. Of course, there will be a trigger, but the event, we're in the middle of it. Everything is an event. You can see it. You can see the society that no longer exists. The world of before, as they call it, no longer exists. So, the event, whether it is the trumpets or the call of Mary, can be at any time already for more than a year. But you don't care about the event, you are the event. So, from the moment there is a question, what about the event? It refers us to time, therefore to hope, therefore to distance, and therefore to non-presence in the present instant. You cannot ask yourself the question of the event, you can only be present in the present instant and live what has to be lived. But to ask again today for a date, whatever it is, I would say, would be a stupidity without a name. The event is us, the coming is us. So, from there, I will answer you that when there are enough sleepers who are in nightmare and awake, the event will be there. But the event is continuous for everyone in our lives every minute, every day, in every circumstance. I will see if there are more questions. So, there is something, but I can't read it completely. So, I have a hard time understanding when you say that creation is a dream. Oh yes, you can't understand it, it's impossible. It is incomprehensible. It can only be lived. Creation, yes, it's a dream, it's a nightmare, in its totality. So, obviously, that you find it hard to understand it. It is, I repeat, no pun intended, you cannot understand it. It is impossible for the consciousness. It is impossible for the person. It is impossible for the superconsciousness. Only when you pass to the other side will you realize that all this is a dream. This world, like all worlds, have never existed. There's no time. It is as simple as that. So, someone who asks the question, will the vaccine stop them from waking up? No, the vaccine kills you faster, tags all, so you will wake up much faster. Also, it's not called a vaccine, it's genetic manipulation, but hey, we're not going back to that. Whether you get nibber, whether Mary calls you, whether, out of fear, you get vaccinated against the chemical with a gene therapy, you'll die anyway. So, you die to sleep anyway. What do you dream? What do you expect? Whether you die from a vaccine or from nibber, it makes no difference. To believe that a vaccine will prevent an awakening in relation to the astronomical and cosmological phenomena that are occurring, is still to believe that this world can modify anything to what it is. All this has been perfectly described in all the prophecies, and this is exactly what we are living. No one will be able to buy or sell unless they are marked with the sign of the beast. So, there is someone who asks the question, does anchor agape in the present instant? So, forget that anchor word literature. Tags what I've heard all my life. Oh, yes, you're not anchored. Oh yes, you're not anchored. But damn it, you're on Earth, so you're necessarily anchored. You're in a body. You can say you don't have your roots on Earth and you're somewhere else. I'm sorry, but you're in the body, therefore you're anchored. This notion of anchoring is a very detestable thing, because when you anchor yourself, you will finally anchor yourself to the earth. You will anchor yourself through the first chakra in the feet, really and concretely. And what are you doing with the heart? The heart does not need anchoring. There's no anchoring. Anchoring is the fear of wandering. It is the fear of movement. It is the fear of life, the fear of the unknown. You are not in spontaneity when you want to anchor. Agape is the present moment. You cannot live agape outside of the present moment. So, I would say that is a bit of an understatement. Agape is the present instant. But do not make of the present moment a religion. The present moment is an experience. Agape is an experience. It is not a social group. It is not a spiritual group. It is not a group of crazy people. It is an experience that is common. It is the only real. So, you may see another question through. Wait for it. I have more and more the feeling during the day of being in a kind of rapid back and forth with the outside. Yes, tags exactly. I think we had question 7 or 8 that mentioned that. So, going back to the dream, tags why Jesus said, I am in this world, but I am not of this world. Yes, tags right. You are in this world, you are in this dream, but you are not the dream, and you are not of any world. Furthermore, Christ had said, there are many dwelling places in the Father's house, since we are talking about Christ, but they are all dwelling places. You are the Father, you are the Son, you are all that you have imagined, created, lived. You have simply forgotten. You'll see if there are any other questions that come up. So that was the first test of this form of, so. Can the vaccine be a little bit limiting to end the reabsorption? No, the vaccine was intended to cut the soul. Steiner had talked about it. The God gene was found, they say, the God DNA. In any case, the access point to multidimensionality. This vaccine has the effective function at the occult level of blocking the soul. But now, what are you afraid of? You do not exist. Whether you died from Keviko, from the vaccine, from a shot in the head, from a meteorite or from Nibiru, what does it change? Realize that through these kinds of questions, there is still that will to pursue the dream of consciousness, or to believe that you can be reached. What is affected is this body, but we all die, don't we, whether by disease, or old age, or a stray bullet, or whatever. To ask these kinds of questions is already putting yourself in a limit, in a limitation somewhere. So, the question. When you die without realizing it, do you go back to another world? No, reincarnation is linked to the soul. The world of karma is the world of predation. This has been widely explained for years. It cannot be believed. The karmic plane takes place in the astral. The notion of being incomplete, of having to evolve, simply shows that you have not lived the truth. Yes, so someone asked me for a date, then again, 22/2/2022. Stop with the numbers. Numbers, by definition, are Luciferic. Everything that is counted is Luciferian. In a gate there are no accounts, there's no time. I repeat, there are only temporal deadlines, for all, be they taxes, Nibiru, marriage or death. But stop talking about dates, I beg you. Well, there's the equinox that just passed, so well, the story for those of a certain age. Every year for the last 50 years or 70 years, we get the equinox with the incredible energies of the equinox. Every year we get the energy of November 11th, 2011, or 11 I don't know what, but aren't you tired of relying on figures and numbers, and annual revolutions? Don't you realize how ridiculous that is? I don't know, things happen over and over again. For 50 years we've been saying, oh, the energy of the solstice, the energy of this day, the energy of that portal, but this is all a dream, let it go, wake up! Otherwise, you will have nightmares, you will really have nightmares, but you will wake up anyway. So now if you want to know the events, you'd like me, you open internet about volcanoes, earthquakes, you open about sky observatories, you look what happens on Earth, you look what happens even with the Keviko there and you will see that you're in the mess, right? It seems to me, until you're totally disgusted with the dream, yell dream. So, the only way out of the dream is to have a nightmare, and I assure you that the nightmare, as I said and as Bernard de Montreal said many months ago, has only just begun, for those who believe in the dream of creation, of course. For the others, it's a joke, tags all. Question. I wondered if the fear of death was not related to what we live between death and incarnation, to what we call the in-between life. No, it is not. The fear of death is inscribed in the reptilian brain because everything that is unknown and everything that ends induces secretions of certain neuromodulators in the brain, the translation of which is fear. The one who is agape cannot be afraid of anything. He can be afraid of this event or the thing, but he cannot be afraid of death or the unknown. He who is established in agape, in the great silence, in bliss, has found the present instant, cannot be deceived even by the stories of Christ. Come on. One cannot keep stories or refer to the story of Christ to be free. Freedom is immediate. As long as you do not accept that freedom is immediate, you will be distancing yourself from it. You are deluded with stories, with the mind, with emotions, with memories, with projections to a new creation, a new earth. But these brothers and sisters, these people, you cannot blame them. They are dreaming. Let them dream in peace. Let them just wake up at their own pace. I remind you that all is written, and if you seek the truth, it is the truth that will find you. You cannot seek it. Therefore, abandon any pretense of wanting to attain or wanting to achieve anything. Remain fully in the present instant, be present to yourself, be lucid and humble, accept, and it is over. Then there is a mother who asks me about her children who spend a lot of time on the internet. Yes, I'm on it 14 hours a day on average. It's very hard to get them off their screens, other than letting go. Is there anything we can do to help them? No. The screen is part of what shields truth. It is the realm of the image. Brother K. Krishnamurti had talked about it extensively in 2011. The image is seduction. When you're stunned in front of a screen, well, that is part of it, for those who are not awake anyway. I am awake, so the screen does nothing to me a priori, except make me tired given the number of hours, but it does not alter my consciousness or my lucidity. However, being in front of a screen, the civilization of screens, will wake you up, because the screen will also blow up in your face, you see. So, this notion of being on the internet is also part of what is written. Now, as a mother, I can't say that you have to leave children in front of screens for 14 hours, but you should have thought about it before. For example, we don't put kids on screens before they're 5 or 6 years old. Especially not a tablet, especially not a phone, because there's a seductive power of the image and the seduction of the image. Everything we look at, even virtual, is imprinted in our brain, is imprinted in our memory, is imprinted by forms of memory imprinting. So, obviously, the one who is not free, is subjected to the image. This is the principle of marketing and advertising. You know, there are neuromarketing techniques, where we are able to make somebody buy something with very precise colors. So, yes, something has to be done, but it's not my job to tell you what to do, to cut the light or to confiscate the objects of crime. But now, I think the internet is also an opportunity. As long as you're not just interested in video games or porn movies, it's a way to access the truth that can help many brothers and sisters. Also, through everything that has happened with this pandemic, since more than a year ago, we have seen the weight of the different information networks in establishing the truth, right? So, obviously, the image is an object of wonder, it's an object of capture and predation, but it's also an object of awakening. In the same way, when you get tired of having a nightmare, you will wake up. At some point the screen will explode in your face. It's also a form of awakening, like the vaccine, well, the pseudo-vaccine. Well, I don't see any more questions coming up. We've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes now. So, yes, so one question that goes over all the symptoms, but this question has been answered many times, the sensations of dizziness, pressure in the head. It's the ultraviolet radiations, the cosmic radiations that come to us, that effectively cause pains in the head or even in the ribcage or in the back. Now, to not link all the symptoms of your body to the energies, there are also pathologies, but that is not my responsibility right now in relation to all. Okay. I hope to see many of you on April 3rd and 4th Zoom this time, and the rest in May. And also, maybe this summer if we're allowed to travel. You've already seen that we've organized 2 little whale vacations, anyway. So, there you go, big kisses to all and see you soon. See you again. Through LUC AYOUN. English translation, LMF.